Hello! This evening we're going to do a flight in the Beech Bonanza G36 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is the stock G36 that comes with the simulator. It's a very good aircraft. Not many people fly it and I'm not really sure why. Although we can see some planes coming in behind us. We're at Santa Barbara in the USA. And if we go and have a look at little nav map, you can see we're going to program this route into the G1000 to see how you do that. We're also going to play with VOR radios, so we'll play with the course deviation indicator and look at the symbology along the way. And we're just going to go and have some fun. You can see the wind is coming out of the west at 9 knots. So we won't be using the ILS today, but we'll do some visual approaches and just have some fun in the G36 and see how it goes. Okay, so you can see it's a very nicely modelled aircraft. The textures and the 3D model are absolutely brilliant. So let's get inside and have a look around inside the cockpit. You can see around behind us inside the cabin. It's all really nicely modelled. And you know, for one of the stock aeroplanes, it's actually quite stunning really how good it is. Okay, first things we're going to do is go and check, just make sure that my controls are working. So we've got the throttle. We've got the mixture, the flap switches are working. Obviously there are no air brakes in this aircraft, which is absolutely fine. We've got the switch for the gear, and we've got the parking brake, so I'm going to put the parking brake on and make sure the axes are correct, so rudder and ailerons and elevators, it's all looking good. Okay, first things first then. When we get into the aircraft, the fuel selector is on the left fuel tank at the moment. So this is obviously a physical switch where you choose the fuel tank. We are going to remove the yoke for a moment just so we can power some things up. So we've got the master power switches down here. So you've got the batteries on the alternators, I think that is. We've got the avionics master switch. We've got the air conditioning, we're not going to bother with that. Can we hear it? Yeah, it's inoperative. Okay, so we've got the pitot heat down here. We've got the engine start switch, obviously. We've got lights. We've got some other inoperative stuff to do with like the vent blower, the auxiliary fuel pump, which we're not going to use. Okay, so let's go and switch on the map display. We've got a caution showing low volts. That's purely because we haven't got the engine started. So to start the engine, we push the mixture forward, we push the propeller forward, we make sure we are on the parking brake, and we turn the engine over. So I'm just going to check volume levels, because you never can be sure with this simulator what's going to happen. So I'm going to turn it up a little bit so you get to hear the engine as well. Okay. So let's go and have a look at the lights. So we'll want the strobe, beacon and nav lights on, and we should be looking good to go. Yeah, so all the warnings have disappeared and we're good to fly. Now we said we were going to go and program a flight plan into the G1000, didn't we? So we're going to go and look at this right hand screen, and the reason we're going to do it on this screen is because it shows us the flight plan bigger than the other one. But in order to do this, we're going to get rid of the yoke out of the way because it covers up these buttons. So we need to press the FPL button, the flight plan button, and it pops open this dialog on the right. And we need to take notice of where we're taking off from, KSBA. So if we press the middle of the FMS knob, it will put the cursor into the flight plan window. And now we need to type in KSBA. So how do we type things in here? We roll the inner knob to choose letters, and we roll the outer knob to move the cursor to the next character. So as we begin rolling, a second dialog pops up where we're entering basically a search for the airfield or the waypoint. So we can go through the numbers and then through the alphabet to find K, S. You can go either way through the alphabet, so I could have saved myself some time here by rolling left instead of right. KS, next character, B, and there is only one for KSBA, it's guessing it already, Santa Barbara Municipal, so I press enter and that inserts it onto the flight plan. Next I want to go to Goyed, which is a waypoint. So again, roll the inner knob and it pulls up the search. We want to begin with G, so I'm going to roll left to go back to G, then roll right to go to O, and Y, so I'm going to go backwards through the alphabet and then forwards through the alphabet. So you'll notice it starts filtering towards the last couple of characters because there are only so many that match what you've already put in. So it was Goyed, wasn't it? Yes, correct. So if I press enter, that's put Goyed in, and it knows, look, it's 9 miles, so you can use that as a sanity check. You can also put in altitudes on the waypoints if you wanted to, but we're not going to do that today. GVO is the VOR, so G, we'll go forwards from there, STUV, and then O. It's halfway through the alphabet, isn't it? So it's probably not going to make much difference. GVO, enter. There we go. Then we're going to fly down to RZS or RZS if you're American. So go backwards through the alphabet. I could have gone the other way, couldn't I? Would have probably been quicker. RZS. Whoops, went straight past it. Enter. Then Kesra. So go back to C. E. S. Kesra, enter. And then back to KSBA. So we want K. Whoops. S. BA, enter. And that's our entire flight plan. So now we can press the middle button to remove the focus, or the middle of the FMS knob I should say, and then press FPL to make it disappear. And you can see now it has been rendered, and we can increase the range so we can see our entire flight plan. Now the wonders of the flight simulator rendering is it's rounded the corners off, which isn't wonderfully helpful, but we're not going to worry too much about that. Okay. So along the way we will use some of the autopilot buttons on the G1000. So you've got the autopilot on off switch, you've got a flight director button, you've got heading mode, altitude hold mode, you've got navigation mode which will follow the flight plan, or the VOR if you've got one tuned in. You've got vertical navigation mode. You remember I mentioned when we were programming in the flight plan you could put altitudes in, so you can get the airplane to follow the altitude you've set. You've got approach mode, so you can follow the glide slope down to the runway if you've got ILS tuned in. You've got back course mode, so if an airfield supports it you can follow ILS from the opposite direction. That's what the back course does. Vertical speed mode, and then nose up and nose down to obviously configure vertical speed. And flight level change mode, where you select the speed to fly at, but we're not going to use that today. We're just going to do some basic flying around. Okay, we'll use the throttle to control our speed as we want to, and we may use vertical speed because it's a nice easy way of climbing and flying around. Okay, so airplane's up and running. Let's go and put the yokes back in place so it looks nice. Oh, we did we check the flap lever? Yes, we did. So we're going to go to takeoff position on the flaps. Let's go and look on the map, see where we are on the airfield. So we're taking off runway 25. So we need to double back on ourselves. So we can press F to center the view up. We can press space to sit up and see over the nose more easily. We can come off the parking brake. and we can ease the throttle forwards. Obviously once you're rolling you can come back off the throttle. Let's see if we can avoid the vans today. The perpetual vans that have a death wish in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So we're just going to taxi out to runway 25. So ground handling in the G36 is quite easy, it's quite straightforward, it's predictable. The one thing I would say is that there's quite a lot of torque. It's a big engine, it's a big heavy lump of an aeroplane, so you do need airspeed as well. So before we get off on our flight we'll do a quick circuit just to see how it behaves. It's a while since I've flown it, so it'll be a refresher for me as well. So I've already dropped flaps to the first position. I'm just getting out onto the centre line and then we'll accelerate. So gently increase the throttle. So the aeroplane is trying to pull left, so I'm just countering that with rudder. Coming up to 70 knots, I'm going to begin to rotate. You can see it's a heavy plane, it doesn't want to come off the ground, so gear up. There's a white area on the indicated airspeed ribbon, that's your safe region for flaps, so I'm going to lift the flaps now. Just hold the aircraft steady in pitch and you can see it's accelerating the whole time. We're climbing out at about 1,000 feet a minute, which is illustrated here on the indicated airspeed ribbon, sorry, on the vertical speed ribbon next to the altimeter. We didn't correct the altimeter, so I've just pressed B, which has calibrated the altimeter to the local atmospheric pressure, so it's accurate. Okay, so I'm going to come back on the throttle and the mixture now to about 80%, 85%, somewhere around there. You can see the RPM is very, very high at the moment and it's flashing, so to stop that we can pull the propeller back. We could actually go for full mixture, it wouldn't hurt. We're not going that far and we're not really worrying about mixture too much. Okay, so let's go and do a turn. So we're still climbing, so we're coming up to 1,500 feet. We're going to level out now on that. Okay, so what is the reciprocal runway direction? 70 degrees. Should we have a zoom out on here so you can see where we are, just for illustrative purposes? So we're just turning to 70 degrees. Started climbing. It's one of the things about multitasking. We're looking at different screens and talking and controlling the airplane. You'll quite often see me not do things as neatly and efficiently as I might have wished to. So here we go, coming up to 60 degrees. Was it 70 degrees, wasn't it? So if we go and just use a bit of elevator trim now to trim the aeroplane out for stable level flight. We're up to 2,000 feet, so I'm not doing a very good job at controlling the aircraft, am I? Okay. So you can see there's the airfield, there's the runway, flying the reciprocal. You can see there's another airplane just taken off over there. It's flying past. If we zoom in, if we can see what it is. Some kind of jet by the look of it. Okay. So let's turn ourselves back to 70 degrees. So yeah, the G36 is very, very docile. Not too difficult to control at all. You can see it does have a tendency to roll gently with torque. So we can counter that with a little bit of aileron trim. So it doesn't sit on the dihedral of the wings in a stable manner like some other aeroplanes will, so you do have to keep an eye on it. Okay. We'll begin reducing power and let's begin descending at the same time and turning round for an approach. So as we do this, we can obviously look out the back and see where the runway is. The warning bell is because I've reduced the throttle right back. It doesn't like it if you haven't got the gear down. So we are within realms of flaps now. Obviously if we drop the flaps then we get a lot more drag. And I've just lowered the gear as well. We're a bit high, but you can see with the amount of drag we've got with the flaps and the gear we can descend quite rapidly. Really not a concern. So we'll do a touch and go and then we'll carry on around this route that we've programmed in and we'll have a look at some of the autopilot functions along the way. So I'm just using kind of visual reference to see where the runway is. We're still a little bit high really, but we're coming down faster than we should, which is fine. So you can see from the indicated airspeed ribbon we really need to stay above 60 knots, so about 70 will be fine for where we come in over the apron. So obviously as I'm levelling up I'm having to introduce more and more power because we're not going downhill, so the speed is bleeding off. Okay, so as you come to a few feet over the runway we can obviously cut the power, flare, and the plane comes down. Obviously we need to counter with the rudder and the nose wheel steering. We go open the engine again, reduce the flaps to takeoff position because we were on full flaps, watching it accelerate through 90 knots, pull up, we're off the ground again, gear up, flaps up, and we're climbing out again. Okay, so having done that, let's go and press the autopilot button and see what happens. Now it's gone into roll and altitude hold mode completely automatically. Oh no, it hasn't. Notice, this is interesting. I'm going to turn the autopilot back off. There's a tendency in some of the stock aeroplanes for the autopilot to lag massively behind what the aeroplane's doing and to take quite some time to correct itself. So before we do this, we're going to press altitude hold. And you can see it's saying pitch and roll mode now. The reason why that happened is when we pressed autopilot it went for altitude hold, but there's no target altitude. Yeah? So we have to set a target altitude, yeah? So we're going to set it for 2,000 feet and we'll go again. And notice, look, it's corrected very quickly and it's gone for altitude hold mode at 1,000 feet, bizarrely. But there's this kind of common bug with some of the airplanes in Flight Sim. If you don't set a target altitude, it kind of tries to dive at the floor. So you just saw me pull it back out of autopilot to fix that. Okay, so we need to get to 2,000 feet, so let's give it a vertical speed to get there. So we press VS, and then we press nose up a few times. So we're now climbing at 500 feet a minute to get to 2,000 feet. We're still in roll mode, so all it's doing at the moment is keeping the wings level. Yeah, it's not worried at all about what direction we're going. So if we say heading mode, it's going to follow the heading knob, but if we press the middle of the heading knob, that's going now the same direction we're going. Yeah, it did start to turn because the heading marker was round here, so when I pressed the middle of the heading knob, it flicked round to the same direction we were going. And you can see at the moment we're deviating slightly from Goyed, which isn't a major problem. So if we did want to change and turn manually back with heading, we can do it, and we can move that heading marker with the heading knob, and the plane is following it because we're in heading mode. Yep, so we come back towards it on the map. The other trick we can do, which is kind of a, we'll do it on the back leg, is we could switch on nav mode. The trouble is, because we're just coming up to a waypoint, it will probably turn us straight towards GVO. Let's try it. Before we do it, we're going to have to change the CDI, the course deviation indicator. At the moment it's in VOR or radio mode. If we press it a couple of times, it goes to GPS mode, which means it will follow the flight plan. So if I press nav now, let's see what happens. So look, it's actually turning left, and now it's going to turn right. So it was trying to get closer to Goyed, and now it's turning towards GVO for us. So I'm going to pull our throttle back a little bit. There's no need to be in such a hurry to whiz across the sky. So now, I know there are some hills coming, so we need to climb a bit more. So we go to the altitude knob, and the outer knob, the outer ring of the altitude knob is thousands of feet, the inner ring is hundreds. So let's go to 5,000. And vertical speed mode and nose up, and you can see that here and here. So target 5,000 feet at 500 feet a minute. That's probably not enough. Let's go for 1,000 feet a minute. This aeroplane can do that, so we'll go back to maximum power. And we may even want to push the propeller all the way forwards again. So we're really pushing it. Notice we're getting an RPM warning now. But we are holding 140 knots. So let's go for 1,500 feet then, see if it can handle it. So we keep an eye on the indicated airspeed. And the plane is pushing itself up and will clear the ridge nicely. So the thing we'll look at next, we'll let the aeroplane fly its way towards, if we zoom out, we can see it on this map. We're flying in towards this VOR station. Now if we let it do what it wants, it will turn and leave that VOR and head for the next one, because it's following the flight plan. Nothing to do with radio beacons. It knows the coordinates of the radio, of the beacon. It's not using the radio beacon. So let's go and sort that out. So you can see up here we've got nav 1 and nav 2 showing above the radio. So up in the top corner, sorry, of the primary flight display. So let's go and have a look at this VOR station. Oops. And I'm just wondering why it has got no numbers written on it. Oh, it's because this thinks it's already completed the flight plan leg. So if I say activate leg, there we go. 113.8, and it's obscured, which is really useful. So what we can do is go GVO and show information for GVO 113.80. So if we go and tune in 113.80, so again, to tune in navigation beacons, the outer ring is the decimals, so it's the integers, sorry, the inner ring is the decimals. So 113.80, then we make it the active frequency, and then we have to change this to CDI mode. Now if we do that, the plane will start moving around. So I'm going to put it back into heading hold mode and center the heading up on the direction we're going. Notice it takes time to do that. It's started to turn and it's coming back again. And it thinks on the flight plan we're on to the next leg, but we've gone to heading mode. But the actual game we're playing here is we want to go to CDI, change us to use the radios. And we can see we wanted to leave that VOR at 81 degrees. Yeah? So we can use the course knob now to say, well, we wanted to leave the radio beacon that's on 113.80. What was it? 81 degrees. So you can see the course here. And it's saying that we are going obviously the wrong way, it's that way. And we are to the left of the line that leaves the beacon at 80 degrees. So let's start out by turning ourselves using heading mode, which we're in heading mode. Let's just turn ourselves then to go 81 degrees, and let's see what that symbology really means. So I'm just rolling the heading knob round until we're going the same direction as the 81 degree radial from the VOR. So the plane is turning. We can see that illustrated on the map here, look. The plane is turning towards the same direction as the next leg of the flight plan. But we're not in the right place in the sky, look. The line is to the right of us, and that's what this means. The line is to the right of us. Now if we press nav, the aeroplane will automatically go and intercept the line. So I've just pressed nav, so it's gone into VOR mode on the autopilot, and it's turning right. It won't carry on turning right, it will plot an intercept course, so it will start leveling out very soon. There it goes, look. So it's going to intercept the line, and you can see that happening, look. So it's going to fly in and then level out when it gets to it, and we'll watch it do it. As we get close to the line, you will see the green bar start to move in, which gives you an indication that we are close to the line. So you can see here the airplane's coming up to the line. Over here you've got a bit nicer view of it. If we zoom in on the range knob, which is underneath all these. There we go. So you will see the green line start to sweep in as we get close to the track, or to the 81 degree radial from the VOR. Here it comes. So when this green line is in the center, it means we are on top of the 81 degree radial from the VOR at 113.80. Yeah? So if looking at this map, that is the 81 degree line. We are almost on top of it now. So you can see the plane has overshot ever so slightly. And the reason that's happening is because we have a crosswind in play. If we press the PFD or primary flight display button here, we can bring up extra symbology on here. So we can press wind and option 3, and that tells us we've got a 5-knot crosswind coming from the left. Yeah, so that's the actual direction the wind is travelling in, or sorry, is travelling from, and that's the speed it's going, and the arrow is relative to our little aeroplane here, so the wind is coming across us from the left. Okay, so we're happily flying along. At 5,000 feet. Now, this is a really good illustration actually now. I'm going to play with the mixture on the engine. We had it on a rich mixture, but we're at 5,000 feet. So I've just pulled the mixture back to about 80% of its, you know, 100% being as rich as it can go. So you will notice the revs aren't being affected drastically. So I'm back to a 50% mixture now, and it's still fine. So we're now burning half the amount of fuel we were before, and we're actually accelerating. The engine is actually operating more efficiently. So it just goes to show, once you get above about 3 or 4,000 feet, you can lean the engine out, and it makes it much more efficient. You're burning half the amount of fuel, and you're actually more power from the engine. Okay, so we're coming up to the next beacon. So let's go and switch back on the CDI to nav mode, or switch the autopilot mode to nav. So if we do that, nothing has happened because it was already in nav mode. Okay, when the CDI is on VOR mode, it will show VOR up here instead of nav, or GPS even. So if I switch if we come back out of here and change the CDI mode again to GPS, notice that has switched to roll mode, so all it's doing now is wing leveling while we were messing around with it. If we press nav again, it goes to GPS, so it's now following the flight plan. So it's going to turn back towards the next waypoint. And notice the CDI has changed colour, the symbology on it. So it's now showing the flight plan line rather than any kind of radial that we might have programmed. And the course does nothing now. Yeah, it doesn't change it. So it's basically giving us the course to the waypoint from the previous waypoint. Yeah, we can't influence it. You can only change the course if you are using the VOR radios to navigate. Okay, so we should be turning right very soon, and it looks like it's about to make the turn. So we're going to come back towards Santa Barbara. We're going to start descending in a moment. As soon as we get away from these hills and start going down this way, we'll program a target altitude, and we can actually show you something interesting there as well. I'm going to go and change the altitude now, and you'll notice nothing happens. So I'm going to go for 1,500 feet, and nothing's happening in terms of altitude. We haven't told the aircraft how to get to 1,500 feet, that's why. Okay, so we're making the turn, and we're going to come off the throttle already. And we'll say we need to descend. So we're going to say vertical speed mode, nose down, 500 feet a minute. Notice we're actually still slowing down. Remember, we're getting lower as well, so in a few moments I will increase the mixture on the throttle because we're going to descend into the thicker air. So so we can actually come down faster. 1,000 feet a minute, and it's just trying to accelerate. So I'm going to drop the flaps. I can, because we're in the first stage of flaps there. So we're using the flaps as drag, basically, to descend quickly. So we're coming down to 4,500, 4,000 feet. So I'm going to start increasing the mixture again. Pull the propeller back away from maximum. You can see there's the airfield out over there. We're still probably not coming down fast enough, so we're going to go for the next stage of flaps and coming down at 1,500 feet a minute now. We'll drop the gear as well. It's all more drag. We're just looking for drag to arrest our descent. And pull the throttle back even further. Now we have the gear down, we won't get the warnings. So the plane is turning itself towards the airfield. Notice it isn't perfectly aligned. We don't have any ILS on this side of the airfield, so we're going to have to manage it ourselves. We'll see how it does. When we get to about 200 feet altitude, we can obviously give it some help. So I've cut back to idle on the engine, gone to maximum flaps. So the autopilot is still operating. This aircraft doesn't have auto land. It doesn't. Obviously, we don't have ILS this side of the runway. So we're going to have to take the autopilot off at some point anyway, which we're going to do now. So I have control. I can prove that by rolling the wings. Press F and space so we get a nice view outside. It's a beautiful day in Santa Barbara. Perfect for messing around in GA aircraft. So yeah, you can see I'm just slowing down too much. So I'm feeding in a little bit more throttle. The enunciations are really annoying, aren't they? Let's get it back to 80 knots and see if it shuts up. Nope, it's not going to shut up. I think that's a bit of a bug. That's the stall warning, and we're down. Okay, flaps up. And we'll taxi off to the parking area. So this is the G36. It's one of the stock aeroplanes for the simulator, and it's actually remarkably good fun to fly. If you've been flying things like the Cessna a lot, this is going to seem a lot faster and a lot heavier, because it is faster and heavier. And you have to take that into account. You could see on approach, as soon as I started to get slow, it started to fall. And it's a big heavy lump as well, so you can't really float over the runway with it as you might with a Cessna. But it's great fun to fly, and for a stock aeroplane it's actually, I think it's very, very good. I should go and park next to the fuel lorry. Oh no, he's going to clear off now, isn't he? Of course he is. You know, we might have looked like we needed fuel. Okay, parking brake on. So obviously switching off the aircraft is a case of pulling the mixture back, which will cut the engine. We can turn the fuel valve to off, and then we can go and pull the pitch back. We can come down here and turn the outside lights off. We can turn the avionics off. We can turn the alternators off and the battery off and the ignition off, and that's it, we're done. So this is the, yeah, as I said, the G36 Beech Bonanza. It's very, very cool. And this was Santa Barbara, which I think is a great place to go flying. There's a couple of VORs nearby, there's an airport, if the wind's the right way it's got ILS as well. So yeah, it's great fun for practicing, and it's usually good weather as well on the live weather. Okay, I'm going to stop recording there and I'll see you again soon.